Welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave, and if you want to keep updated with what's really going on in Australia, click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. So today I'm in Eastwood, which is now officially the capital of terrorism in Australia because something massive happened only a couple of days ago. This guy called Choi, who is a South Korean born man. He came here when he was about 9 years old, lived in Australia for about 30 years, was arrested on terrorism charges for aiding and abetting North Korea. I want to make this really clear. Australia has the highest standard of living and has had the highest standard of living compared to any other country in the world for approximately 8 years now. Just in case you're watching this in 15 years time and you're wondering how Australia changed in this period. So just for future reference, I'm just saying that for someone who might be logging in and watching this video in 15 years time. Compared to even South Korea, Korea even today and Korea 30 years ago had a terrible standard of living compared to Australia. So you're probably wondering, why would someone turn informant for another rogue regime like North Korea, especially when the standard of living is so high here? And the Australian Federal Police have also said that they are absolutely shocked at this, but me personally, I'm not shocked at all. Now, another thing that I'd like to add straight up early in the video is there's a very big difference between Asians. See, this guy was born in South Korea, he lived there for 10 years, so he is kind of Korean by nature. He's different from someone who's Asian who was born here. You often see like 60-year-old men that have lived here for like 40 years, but they came here when they were 20 and they still identify as Chinese. People who are born here are very different. They call them ABCs, ABAs, whatever. Someone who is born here, who is Asian, has a very different view on Australia than someone who was born overseas, and there's a difference between how old they were when they were born overseas and came over here. So if they came over here when they were 10 years old and they lived in an Asian enclave which was extremely racist, like I perceive Eastwood to be, their view on the world would be very different from an ABC that was actually born here. So not quite sure that a lot of you guys out there are aware of the differences here. I have a lot of friends that are Asian and they're born in Australia, and they're more bogan than I am. They eat meat pies and have barbecues and drink more than I do, and they speak like this, "G'day mate." Don't enter this debate without having the knowledge of the different types of people in Australia. Also, it depends on what country they come from. You got to understand this is a large grey area with lots of nuances. There's no black and white here, and I just want to make that clear that it's very nuanced in this area, and you cannot paint everybody with the same brush. One thing I think that we need to be aware of is that we're not in America. But in Australia, I think we need to redefine what terrorism is and be very clear on what it is, and have the nuances to understand the ever-changing landscape within Australia. And we're not in America, where it's very clear that Islam and America has this real big beef going on. But I think we need to redefine what terrorism is in Australia. Milo Yiannopoulos came here only last week, and there was this big uproar against Islam. I'm not Islamic, by the way. I'm not Muslim. I'm not religious in any way. I don't think that Islam is the biggest threat in Australia. I think we have far greater threats in Australia, and Australians within Australia are in far more danger to our lives today than a North Korean living within North Korea, because a North Korean living within North Korea isn't surrounded by Americans who are immigrants within North Korea. Yet Australia is surrounded by a lot of possible terrorists within Australia from North Korea. And from what we have learnt today, a South Korean defector could possibly turn on Australia at any moment without notice, and we don't fully understand why. I do. Now back to Choi, who's a South Korean dude living in Australia, naturalized Australian, lived here for most of his life, and Eastwood. Now, one thing I did notice when I looked at the map, that if a nuclear bomb was to land on Sydney CBD, Eastwood just happens to be outside of the blast radius. But I have noticed when I look at the map of Sydney that there are other notable suburbs, which are Asian enclaves that are very similar to Eastwood, that just happen to be outside what would be a blast radius if a nuclear bomb was to hit Sydney CBD. And here's a few suggestions. Now, one of the big ones is Chatswood, of course, Hurstville, Burwood, Strathfield. Some of these suburbs, in my opinion, if Eastwood was to be a breeding ground for terrorism, some of these other suburbs are very similar in demographic and possibly could be seen as breeding grounds for terrorism as well. One thing I've noticed from doing research, a lot of South Koreans and North Koreans, they would prefer to reunite Korea, the Korean Peninsula. Another factor I'd like to add to this is that there's a possibility that Chan Han-soy was able to identify with North Koreans more than the Australians that he lives with and the country that he comes from, purely on the basis of race. It's not that race is a big issue to me, but being online for 3 years and talking about race and having all of the data to show for it, race is a big issue to a lot of Asians. Now, to back up my claims that race is such a big issue for Asians, even in Australia, but more specifically abroad, but if you have a lot of immigrants from overseas and they come here and they bring this racism with them, look at these 4 guys, it's like the Fung Bros or something. There's no diversity in any of the real estates around here. Could I call LJ Hooker racist? Well, yes, I could. I don't see anybody from the subcontinent, I don't see any black people, I don't see any white people. I just see Asian guys, and by the looks of their names, they're all from China. There's not even international diversity, it's just it just seems a bit racist out here to me. And some of the looks that I've got just walking around, it might be because of the camera, but a lot of the looks that I get from a lot of the guys walking by, and they look at you, they're like, and they give you this bad look. It's like I'm not even welcome in Eastwood. But keep in mind, these are Asians which are fresh off the boat and they're in their Asian enclave and they're free to be racist in Eastwood. But I gotta say that a lot of the Asians that were actually born here, I feel safer around them. I actually don't really feel that safe around a lot of Asian immigrants, but I do feel very safe around Asian, Australian born or been here such a long time that they haven't learned all of these bad racist, bad habits from overseas. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I know I'm a little bit ahead of my time these days. Maybe 15 years in advance you guys will look back and you'll be like, oh, this guy was right. But anyway, click that subscribe button if you want to know what the future of Australia holds. And I'll see you guys very soon.
Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Been spending most our lives living